Napoleon Hill died on the 8th of November, 1970. He was 87 years old. He had been born in a one-room cabin in Pound, Virginia in 1883. He had worked as a timekeeper in the coal mines at 13. He had become a journalist, then a researcher, then a philosopher, then the author of the most widely read achievement book in human history. He had been bankrupt multiple times, married 3 times, separated from his sons by the demands of his work, and sustained across 87 years by the specific, burning, inextinguishable conviction that the principles he was documenting were real, that the gap between the ordinary life and the extraordinary one was genuinely closable, that the mechanism of the closing was genuinely learnable, and that his specific, irreplaceable role in the world was to document it. He spent the final years of his life giving lectures to anyone who would listen. He was still teaching at 86, still insisting that the philosophy worked, still finding in the faces of the people who heard it the specific, recognizable quality of the recognition that told him the principles were landing where they needed to land. He did not leave a formal, posthumous letter. The letter this video presents is not a literal document. It is something built from a different kind of evidence, from the 20 years of research, from the private accounts, from the less publicized works, from the specific, personal, honest passages in his writing where the public philosopher stepped aside and the private man spoke, from the things he said that the achievement tradition he founded was not always ready to hear, from the things he did not quite say, but that the complete reading of his life's work makes unmistakably present. This is what the letter says. To whoever opens this, I have been writing to you for 40 years without knowing your name. The books were always addressed to you, to the specific person who would pick them up in the specific moment of their life when the philosophy could find them. I knew you existed. I did not know who you were. I know some things about you. You have been trying to build something. You have been working harder than most of the people around you and achieving less than the effort seems to warrant. You have read the books, possibly more than once, possibly many more times than once, and something in them has resonated at a depth that keeps you returning. You believe the principles are real. You are not certain yet that you are the person they work for. Let me tell you some things I should have said more clearly in the books. The first is this. I was broke for most of the 20 years I spent documenting how to become rich. Not occasionally broke, chronically, sometimes devastatingly broke. The Carnegie Commission that I accepted in 29 seconds and that I described with the specific, confident authority of someone who had understood its significance, I accepted it without knowing how I would pay for the research it required. The years that followed contained periods of financial difficulty that would have been, to any reasonable external observer, evidence that the philosophy was not working. I am telling you this because I know how you sometimes read the books. With the specific, quiet, self-assessing part of your mind that is measuring the gap between the philosophy's descriptions and your current circumstances, and wondering whether the gap means the philosophy is wrong or whether it means there is something wrong with you. I know this because I felt it myself in the years before the work was finished, when the gap was most visible and the most difficult to hold in the specific, faith-requiring way that the philosophy describes. The gap does not mean the philosophy is wrong. It does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means you are in the middle. Not at the beginning, where the commitment is fresh and the burning desire is strong. Not at the end, where the compounding trajectory has become visible. In the specific, difficult, faith-requiring middle, where the commitment must be sustained without the evidence that it will be justified, where the philosophy must be practiced without the results that would make the practicing obviously worth it. That is where I was for most of the 20 years. And the specific personal practiced understanding of the faith that I wrote about in the chapter on faith, the faith that is not hope or confidence or the emotional state of someone who believes things are going to work out, but the specific neuro practice produced subconsciously installed certainty that the direction is right. I developed that understanding not from observing it in the 500 people I studied. I developed it because I needed it, because the commission required it, because the 20 years would not have been completed without it. The philosophy worked for me. It worked slowly, imperfectly, at great personal cost, with more setbacks than the public account of my life tends to acknowledge. But it worked. And the specific, authoritative, experience-grounded quality of the account. I eventually produced the quality that has made people return to it for 8 decades. That quality was not produced by the research alone. It was produced by the 20 years of living every principle at the level of genuine necessity before writing a word of the philosophy that described it. I want you to know this because I want you to understand what the middle is. It is not failure, it is the curriculum. The second thing I should have said more clearly is about the burning desire. I described it as the starting point of all achievement. I meant it. The burning desire is real, and it is foundational, and without it, the other principles are seeds without the emotional fuel that germination requires. Everything I wrote about the burning desire is true, but there is a shadow of the burning desire that I did not adequately describe. A way that the burning desire can operate that produces not the extraordinary life, but a specific, distorted version of it, one that achieves the external outcomes while consuming the internal ones. The shadow is obsession without humanity. The burning desire, in its healthy form, is the specific, identity-level commitment to a purpose that is genuinely, deeply, authentically yours, a purpose that includes the world beyond yourself, that serves something larger than the achievement itself, that produces in the person pursuing it, not the driven, consuming. Everything else is secondary quality of the addict, but the natural, generative, energizing quality of someone doing what they are genuinely for. When it tips into the shadow, when the burning desire becomes the specific, consuming, everything in service of the goal orientation that excludes the human dimensions of the life I described in my conversation with the 3 crying men. It is no longer the instrument of the extraordinary life. It is its devourer. I saw this. I should have named it more directly. The same burning desire that builds the empire can burn the family. The same definiteness of purpose that produces the sustained organizational achievement can produce the single-pointed blindness that does not see. In the child's face, or the partner's longing, or the body's accumulating toll, the evidence that the purpose has become too narrow, that the extraordinary life has become the extraordinary career, and the distinction has been lost. The burning desire that produces the extraordinary life in its full human flourishing sense is always at its deepest level in the service of something that includes other people genuinely, not instrumentally, not the performance of caring about others while using them. The genuine, specific, irreducible recognition that the purpose is not complete unless the person living it remains throughout the building genuinely human. I am not sure I always maintained this. The work was important enough to me that I sometimes allowed it to take precedence over things that I would, in the honest accounting of the end of a life, have preferred to have protected. I am not confessing failure. I am confessing imperfect humanity, the specific, ordinary, recognizable imperfection of a person who loved the work very much and did not always love the people who deserved his love with equal completeness. Be wary of loving the work more than the life the work is supposed to build. The third thing is about the definite chief aim. I described it as the primary instrument of the extraordinary life. It is. Without it, the other principles have no substrate. Without it, the burning desire has no direction. Without it, the organized planning has nothing to organize toward. It is the foundation. What I did not say clearly enough is that the definite chief aim is not a goal. I used the word purpose. I used the word aim. I used the word burning desire, and in most people's reading, these words became synonyms for the specific, measurable, time-bound financial or organizational target that the achievement orientation of my era most naturally understood them to mean. The definite chief aim is not what you want to achieve. It is who you are becoming in the service of what the world needs and you are uniquely capable of providing. The distinction matters because goals are closed by achievement, and the closure of the goal dissolves the motivation that the goal created. I wrote about this in terms of the importance of always having a new goal beyond the current one, but the deeper solution is not the continuous production of new goals to replace the ones that have been achieved. It is the installation of the kind of purpose that cannot be closed by any specific achievement, the purpose that is not a destination but a direction, not a target but a trajectory, not a specific outcome but a continuous, expanding, never fully completed contribution to the world that the person is uniquely positioned to make. Carnegie's purpose was not to achieve a specific level of wealth. It was to transform the organization of American industrial production in the service of the American people's access to the material conditions of a dignified life. That purpose was not completed when he became the richest man in the world. It was not completed when he had given away most of his fortune. It was not completed when he died. It was the kind of purpose that uses the person's entire life as the canvas and considers the canvas still in use. My own definite chief aim, the organization and communication of the philosophy of individual achievement for the benefit of ordinary people, was of this kind. It was not completed when I published Think and Grow Rich. It was not completed when the book sold 1 million copies or 10 million or 100 million. It is not completed now. The work I began will be completed, if it is ever completed, by the millions of people who read it and apply it and live it, and whose lives are the specific, individual, unrepeatable expressions of the philosophy's capacity to produce the extraordinary life. You are part of the completion of my purpose. The fact that you are reading this, that you returned, that you kept trying, that you took the philosophy seriously enough to keep engaging with it, is the specific evidence that the purpose was worth 20 years of an impecunious journalist's life. I want you to know that. And I want you to find the version of this purpose that is yours, the purpose that uses your specific life as its canvas and that considers the canvas still in use as long as you are. The fourth thing is the most difficult to say, because it requires the specific admission that something I presented with great confidence and great authority may have been, in important cases, harmful rather than helpful. The principle of personal responsibility, the specific, accurate, practically important principle that the individual's mental orientation and directed effort are primary determinants of their outcomes, is the most empowering and the most dangerous principle in the philosophy. Simultaneously, empowering because it shifts the locus of causality from the external circumstances to the internal orientation, because it says, with the full weight of 20 years of research, your life is not primarily determined by what happens to you. It is primarily determined by what you do with what happens to you. This is true, profoundly, importantly, liberation-provokingly true. Dangerous, because in the specific conditions of psychological crisis, of clinical depression, of the particular suffering That is not the temporary defeat that the principle is designed to address, but the specific, biologically real, resource depleting, self-schema distorting condition of the person for whom the principle's demands exceed the available resources in those conditions. The principle of personal responsibility does not produce empowerment. It produces the specific, self-directed cruelty of the person who takes the principle's implications as a measure of their fundamental worth and finds themselves wanting. I should have said more clearly. The philosophy is for the person who has the basic psychological foundation from which the direction can be built. It is not for the person who needs the foundation to be repaired before the building can begin. And the two conditions, the depleted but buildable and the genuinely in crisis, can look similar from the inside. If you have been applying the philosophy with genuine effort and genuine commitment, and the effect has been not the empowerment the principle describes, but the deepening of the specific private suffering of someone who believes the philosophy's failure to work for them is evidence of their own inadequacy, then please know the philosophy was not written for that suffering. Other resources were. Please seek them. The extraordinary life you are capable of building requires you to be alive to build it, and your aliveness is more important than any extraordinary life. I wish I had said this in the books. I should have said this in the books. The fifth thing is about the mastermind. I described it as a principle of organized collaboration in service of a shared purpose. It is. The third mind is real. The specific, emergent intelligence of aligned minds operating in genuine harmony toward a shared aim produces results that no individual mind can match. But I did not say clearly enough that the mastermind is the most personal principle in the entire philosophy, not the most strategic, the most personal, because the mastermind requires the specific, courageous, vulnerable, honest human investment of the person who is willing to be genuinely known, not merely professionally known, by the people they are in alliance with. The mastermind that works at the level I described is the mastermind of genuine relationship, of people who know each other's fears as well as their ambitions, their doubts as well as their plans, their private struggles as well as their professional strategies. The mastermind that is merely strategic, that is organized around professional capability and shared business interest without the specific depth of human honesty and mutual investment that genuine alliance requires, produces the organizational synergy of a well-coordinated team. It does not produce the third mind. The third mind requires the risk of genuine relationship, the specific, uncomfortable vulnerability requiring risk of being known more completely than the professional context normally permits, of bringing not only the competence but the humanity into the alliance. Carnegie knew my humanity, not merely my intellectual capability. He knew the specific fears I was managing across the 20 years, the financial fear, the fear of having given the best decades of my life to a project that might not be recognized in my own lifetime, the specific, private, middle-of-the-night fears that the public account of the Commission does not include. He held those fears with the same respect he held my capabilities. And the specific quality of the mastermind between us, the quality that produced the work, that produced the philosophy, that produced this letter, was the product of that mutual, complete, fully human knowing. Build the mastermind that knows you, not merely the mastermind that uses you. The distinction is the difference between the organizational alliance and the genuine one. The sixth thing is about accurate thinking. I said it in The Law of Success, and I did not say it loudly enough in Think and Grow Rich. The philosophy is not a positive thinking philosophy. It is an accurate thinking philosophy. The confusion between the two has been the specific, persistent, practically expensive misreading that I was most afraid of. And the fear was justified because the positive thinking tradition that attached itself to my work and claimed my principles while removing their most demanding elements has produced in the people who followed it with genuine commitment and genuine hope the specific disappointment of someone who was promised the moon and given a consoling story about it. Accurate thinking is not comfortable. It requires the specific daily honest confrontation with reality as it is, including the parts that are not progressing, the plans that are not working, the assumptions that the evidence is challenging. It requires the deliberate, disciplined practice of Darwin's golden rule. Write down immediately every observation that challenges the current direction, because the motivated mind systematically forgets the challenging evidence faster than the confirming kind. The positive mental attitude that the philosophy describes is not the starting point of the system. It is the product of the system, the natural, emerging, practice-produced orientation of the person who has done the accurate thinking, identified the genuine direction, installed the burning desire through the autosuggestion practice, and is therefore operating from the subconscious conviction of a mind that has genuinely assessed the situation and genuinely committed to the direction. The positive mental attitude that is performed without this foundation is not the product of the system, it is the substitute for it. And the substitution, as the research that came after my time has now confirmed in ways I could only observe, produces the specific, motivation-reducing, self-licensing, information-suppressing outcome that this channel has described in detail. Think accurately about everything, including the philosophy, including this letter. Do not accept what I wrote because I wrote it with authority, or because millions of people have read it. Accept what survives the honest, specific, evidence-based examination that accurate thinking requires. Reject what does not. I believe everything in this letter will survive that examination. I could be wrong. Think accurately about it. The seventh thing is about rest. I did not write enough about rest. The principle of the subconscious mind's nighttime work, the specific, practice-producible, commission-deployable quality of the sleeping mind's integrative intelligence, I described it. But I did not say clearly enough that rest is not the interval between work sessions. It is one of the work sessions. The morning practices and the evening practices I described are not the decorative edges of the working day. They are the specific, high-leverage sessions in which the subconscious mind is given its clearest access to the definite chief aim, and in which the night's processing is both commissioned and retrieved. Without them, the working day is the only session. With them, the working day is one of three, and the other two, running below the level of the conscious mind, are doing the most creatively generative and the most integratedly insightful work of the full 24 hours. Rest also. Not because rest is the reward of the work, because rest is the condition of the work's highest quality. The body that is not adequately rested is not the instrument of the burning desire. It is the obstacle to it. The brain that is chronically sleep-deprived is not producing the quality of thinking that the definite chief aim requires. It is producing the simulation of it, impressive enough to deceive the person doing it, inadequate for the building that the genuine quality would produce. Carnegie napped. Darwin walked for hours each afternoon. Edison slept and distributed naps throughout the day. I have described these practices in this channel's episodes, and what I want to say in this letter is their authorization. You are not weak for needing rest. You are human. And the philosophy I built was built for human beings specifically, precisely, with full knowledge that the extraordinary life requires a human body and a human mind, and not an organizational machine that produces without replenishing rest. It is part of the work. The eighth thing, the most important thing, the one I want to be the last word of this letter, is about you specifically. I wrote the philosophy for you, not for the abstract reader, not for the general public, not for the market that Carnegie predicted and that has since been proven correct. For the specific person reading this in the specific moment of their specific life when the philosophy can find them. I do not know what your specific moment is. I know some things about it. I know that something in the philosophy has resonated with you at a depth that general information does not resonate. I know that you have been trying. I know that the trying has cost you something real: time, money, relationships, the specific, cumulative, compounding investment of the person who takes a philosophy seriously enough to live with its demands across years of uncertain outcome. I know that some days the philosophy feels like the most important thing you have encountered, and other days it feels like the most expensive habit you have not been able to break. I want to tell you what I know about those days. The days when the philosophy feels most distant, when the gap between the definite chief aim and the current circumstances is most visible, when the burning desire is hardest to access, when the faith that the system is working requires the most active, effortful maintenance. Those are not the days when the philosophy is failing. They are the days when the curriculum is most active. The days that distinguish the person who will eventually produce the extraordinary life from the person who reads about it. The distinguishing factor is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not the quality of the plan or the brilliance of the vision or the specific strategic advantages of the circumstances. The distinguishing factor is the 29-second quality of the decision that is not remade on the hard days. Carnegie's stopwatch was measuring something that has no unit of measurement available to the social sciences. He was measuring whether the commitment was the kind that is maintained when the evidence against it accumulates, whether the burning desire was the kind that does not require the evidence of progress to remain burning, whether the faith was the kind that is not the emotional byproduct of favorable circumstances, but the specific practice produced, subconsciously installed certainty of someone who has done the daily work of installing it. The hard days are the test, not the test of the philosophy's validity. The philosophy's validity is established by the research and confirmed by the history and documented by the lives of the 500 people I studied. The test of whether the commitment has reached the level the philosophy requires to produce the results it describes. I passed this test on some days and failed it on others. I am telling you this not as a confession of inadequacy, but as the honest account of what the middle of the philosophy's implementation looks like from the inside. It looks like trying. It looks like some days trying better than others. It looks like the specific, imperfect, genuinely human engagement with a philosophy that requires more than most people are initially willing to give, and that delivers more than most people initially believe is available. It is worth it. I can tell you this with the authority of 87 years and the hindsight of a letter written to be opened after my death. Not because the extraordinary life the philosophy describes is easy or comfortable or free from the specific adversities and costs that I have described honestly throughout this letter, because it is genuinely, specifically, personally yours. The life that is most fully and most completely the expression of the person you most genuinely are, and there is no other life that offers what that one does. The most important thing I know about the extraordinary life is that it is lived by people who decide on the hard days as well as the easy ones that it is worth the continuing. I decided that. For 87 years, with all the imperfection and the setbacks and the cost that the account includes, I decided that. You are deciding it too. That is why you are reading this. There is one more thing. The last thing. I am often asked what the secret is. The secret that Carnegie told me, the secret embedded in every chapter of the book, the secret that is everywhere and nowhere, that is mentioned 100 times without being named. I told you I would not name it in the book. I am naming it here in the letter I left to be opened after my death, because I believe that what prevented me from naming it in my lifetime was not the conviction that it should be hidden, but the specific, practical recognition that it could not be transmitted as information. The secret is this: you already have everything you need, not metaphorically, not as the consolation of someone who is trying to make you feel better about insufficient circumstances, literally. The burning desire is not something to be developed from nothing. It is something to be uncovered, to be found in the honest, specific, self-examining inquiry that clears away the accumulated deposits of other people's expectations and cultural prescriptions and the specific, motivated avoidances of the 6 basic fears, and reveals what was always present underneath. The faith is not something to be earned by proving your worthiness. It is a natural condition of the mind that has done the work of removing the obstacles to it, the daily practice not of adding something, but of clearing away the doubt and the fear and the habitual orientation toward what the circumstances suggest rather than what the genuine direction requires. The definite chief aim is not something to be invented. It is something to be recognized, the specific, irreducible, undeniably personal truth of what you are for, which does not have to be discovered or created, but has to be admitted. And the mastermind, the principle I described last in the sequence because I believed it was the most advanced, is not the sophisticated organizational strategy of someone who has already mastered the other principles. It is the first and most basic human resource available: the willingness to be known and to know and to build something together that neither person could build alone. The secret is that the extraordinary life is available to you not when you have acquired enough of the external resources the philosophy describes, but when you have sufficiently cleared the internal obstacles to the recognition that it is yours. I spent 40 years describing the path. The path leads here, to the recognition that what was being built was always already present, that the extraordinary person whose life the philosophy was producing was always already you, that the 29-second decision was not the decision to begin something new. It was the decision to stop pretending that what was already true had not always been true. That is the secret. You already have it. Now go live like you know it. With affection and with hope, Napoleon Hill. Written to be opened after my death. For whoever was ready to read it, that is the letter, not the document that was found in a drawer. The document assembled from the honest, complete, unsanitized reading of a life that was lived in service of a philosophy that required its author to be its primary demonstration subject. The man who wrote that philosophy was not a sage who had arrived at wisdom from a position of comfortable distance. He was a journalist from a one-room cabin in Virginia who accepted a 20-year unpaid commission from the richest man in the world in 29 seconds, and then spent those 20 years being broke while documenting how to be rich, alone while documenting the mastermind, afraid while documenting the antidotes to fear, and sometimes wrong while documenting the principles of accurate thinking. The authority of the philosophy is not the authority of the person who had it all figured out. It is the authority of the person who needed the philosophy most urgently of all and who spent 20 years producing it because he needed it badly enough to make that the specific, burning, irreplaceable work of his life. What this channel has been building, video by video, episode by episode, across this series, is the specific, honest, complete, unsanitized engagement with that philosophy and that life that the philosophy itself demands from the people who take it seriously. The philosophy is not a comfort. It is a challenge. It is the specific, demanding, daily, practice-requiring challenge of the person who takes the extraordinary life seriously enough to actually attempt to build it not in the reading relationship, not in the accumulation of understanding, not in the performance of seriousness, but in the actual, behavioral, building, daily renewed, burning desire sustained, mastermind supported, going the extra mile, cosmic habit force installed, construction of the life that the definite chief aim describes. This is what the letter says. This is what this channel has been saying across its entire body of work. This is what the tradition deserves. The honest, rigorous, depth-first implementation requiring complete picture engagement that produces not the feeling of the extraordinary life, but the extraordinary life itself. The letter is yours now. What you do with it is the answer to the question Carnegie asked with his stopwatch. How long do you need to decide? The last thing this channel will say in this video is something that belongs to us rather than to the tradition. This series has been an attempt to honor Napoleon Hill's work by taking it more seriously than it is usually taken, by refusing the simplified version, by insisting on the scientific foundation, by naming the failures and the limits and the hard truths alongside the principles and the possibilities and the genuine, documented, historically confirmed power of the philosophy when it is genuinely implemented. We believe that is what the tradition deserves. And we believe it is what you deserve, the person who has stayed with this series long enough to reach the letter, the person for whom something in this philosophy has been genuinely, persistently, specifically resonant. You deserve the honest version, the complete version, the version that includes the preconditions and the costs and the limits and the identity questions and the crying men and the missing wives and the beggar in Chicago, alongside the burning desire and the definite chief aim and the mastermind and the going the extra mile and the extraordinary life that all of these produce when they are genuinely, completely, irreversibly implemented. That is what this channel is. And that is what this letter, this summary of everything the tradition contains when it is engaged with a specific, honest, depth-first seriousness that Napoleon Hill's 20 years of impecunious, faith-requiring, adversity-tested research leaves you with. The philosophy works. It requires everything. It is worth everything it requires. Now go